A single father in a faded gray hoodie stood inside Blackstone Motors, while every eye in the showroom measured him like a stain on the marble floor. The moment his fingers brushed the black coupe priced near $400,000, the sales manager cut across the room and ordered security to walk him out. Soft laughter followed him through the glass doors. He said nothing. He did not look back. The next morning, the entire showroom went silent as a bespoke Rolls-Royce Phantom rolled to the curb, and the man stepping out of it was him. The morning Nathan Cole walked into Blackstone Motors, the sky over Boston was the color of unpolished steel, and the wind, off the Charles, carried that hard winter edge that made people pull their collars up without thinking. He parked his old sedan 2 blocks down on a side street, away from the valet line, because parking it under the showroom's glass canopy felt like an apology he did not owe anyone. The hoodie he wore was the same one he had worn for 9 years. Dark gray once, faded now to something closer to fog, with the cuffs gone soft, from wash after wash. He kept his hands in the front pocket as he walked. He had not always dressed this way. Years ago, when his wife was still alive, she used to pick out shirts for him on Sunday evenings and lay them across the back of the bedroom chair, the way other women might arrange flowers. After she was gone, the shirts stayed in the closet for a long time, and the hoodie became something simpler. It was easier to disappear inside it. Disappearing, he had learned, was a useful skill when a man's name appeared in financial news, with words like billion and acquisition attached to it, words that turned strangers into people who wanted something. He had become, after her death, a quiet kind of father and a quieter kind of man, and the hoodie suited both. What no one at Blackstone Motors could have guessed looking at him through the glass that morning was that the quiet man in the faded hoodie was the founder and majority holder of Cole Capital, a private investment firm out of the South End that had quietly moved nearly $400 million in the last fiscal year alone. He had started it at 26 with a borrowed desk and one client who believed in him. That client had passed away years later and left him a portfolio Nathan still managed personally because the dead man's daughters thought of him as family. That was the kind of life he had built. Small circles, long loyalties, no noise. The coupe was the reason he came. A black limited edition coupe with a hand-stitched interior and an engine block built in a small Italian town whose name he could pronounce only because his late wife had grown up nearby. She had loved the car the moment the manufacturer announced it. She had clipped the photo from a magazine and stuck it on the fridge under a magnet shaped like a tomato. And for months afterward, whenever she opened the freezer, she would look at the picture and say nothing, which in their marriage had always been the loudest kind of yes. She was not here anymore to drive it. He was almost 38 years old and had decided, after a long autumn of thinking about it, that he would buy the car anyway. Not as a trophy, as a finished sentence. He pushed through the glass door at 10:30 in the morning, and the warmth of the showroom hit him with the smell of new leather and floor polish. A receptionist looked up, registered the hoodie, and looked back down at her screen, the way people look down when they have decided you will not be their problem. He kept walking. The cars sat in long, careful diagonals across the white marble, each one lit from above, like something in a museum, and Nathan moved between them slowly, taking his time, letting his eyes find the coupe in its glass-walled alcove at the back of the room. Vanessa Hart saw him before he saw her. She was standing near the espresso bar at the rear of the showroom, holding a porcelain cup, the way she always held things she did not actually want, which was loosely by the rim between 2 fingers. She had been at Blackstone Motors for 7 years and had managed the sales floor for 4 of them, and in that time, she had developed what she privately called an instinct. The instinct was that money announced itself. Money came in through the door with a particular posture, with a watch that caught the light, with shoes that had been polished by someone other than the wearer. The man in the hoodie had none of these things, Her instinct told her he was lost. She set her cup down on the marble counter and crossed the showroom on heels that made a thin, decisive sound against the floor. Her hair was pulled back into a low knot, the same dark color as her blouse, and she wore the kind of small gold earrings that women wear when they want to look expensive without looking like they are trying. Two of her junior salesmen glanced up from their desks and then glanced away again, because Vanessa walking somewhere with purpose was a thing you watched out of the corner of your eye, never directly. "Can I help you with something, Vernon, monsieur?" Vanessa asked. The word "sir" landed flat, the way a coin lands when you drop it on a table to test whether it is real. Nathan turned toward her without taking his hands out of his pocket. "I'd like to look at the coupe," he said. He nodded toward the glass alcove. "The black one. The limited." Her smile arrived a half-second too late, and when it did not reach her eyes. "That model starts at $390,000, she said. "Before options." She let the number sit in the air between them. "We do have a pre-owned lineup along the south wall. Some very good values in the 80 to 100,000 range. Would you like me to show you?" "I'd like to see the coupe," Nathan said, again the same tone, the same temperature. A couple in matching cashmere coats drifted past them, and Vanessa's eyes followed the wife's handbag for a moment, before returning to Nathan. "Of course," she said. "Let me find someone who can answer your questions." She turned and walked away from him without waiting for a reply, which was in the language of that showroom, the most efficient way to make a man feel like he was not there. He stood alone for almost 3 minutes. He watched her cross the floor to the cashmere couple. Instead, watched her laugh at something the husband said. Watched her place a guiding hand near, but not on the wife's elbow, as she led them toward a sedan in a deeper part of the room. Anger was not what he felt. He had been angry only twice that he could clearly remember in his adult life, and neither time had been about himself. A younger salesman noticed him standing there. The young man's name tag read, Daniel Reeves, and he had the kind of face that had not yet learned how to lie politely. He approached Nathan with a small, uncertain step, as if he were afraid of doing something wrong by being kind. "Sir, were you waiting for someone?" Daniel said. "I asked about the coupe," Nathan said, and tilted his head toward the alcove. "Oh, the limited," Daniel said. His eyes brightened. "I love that car. Would you like to see the interior? I can pull the keys." Before Nathan could answer, Vanessa was back. She had crossed the floor on those quick heels again, and her hand came down lightly on Daniel's shoulder, the way a manager corrects a junior without making a scene. "Daniel, the Petersons just walked in for their 215, she said evenly. "They're on the financing for the sedan from last week. Go take care of them, please." Daniel hesitated, his mouth opening and then closing without sound. He gave Nathan a small, apologetic glance and then walked away toward a gray-haired couple Nathan had not noticed entering. Vanessa turned to Nathan then, and the smile she had worn for the cashmere couple was gone. In its place was something thinner, more practical. "Sir," she said, "I appreciate your interest, but the coupe is not a vehicle we typically pull out for casual inspection. The owner of that particular unit has spoken to several pre-qualified clients already. I'd hate to waste your time." "I'd like to see the interior," Nathan said. Her voice dropped a notch into the register people use when they want to be heard only by the person in front of them. "I think you might be more comfortable looking at something within your range. Perhaps you'd be happier at one of our partner lots in Quincy. They carry excellent inventory at more accessible prices." She let that sit, and then added almost gently, "Some of our guests today have been waiting weeks for an appointment. I'd ask you to respect that." A small laugh rose somewhere behind her from one of the sales desks. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The cashmere wife glanced over her shoulder from across the room, a flicker of amusement on her face, and turned back to the sedan she was pretending to consider. Nathan looked at Vanessa for a long moment. He looked at her, the way a man looks at a window, He is deciding whether to open or walk past. Then he said very quietly, "I'll wait for the manager." "I am the manager," Vanessa said. "Then I'll wait for the owner." Her smile thinned all the way out. She lifted a hand, and a security guard near the front door began to move toward them across the marble. The guard was a heavy-set man in a black suit jacket, with the kind of slow, apologetic walk that men in that job learned so they do not look like they are enjoying themselves. He stopped beside Vanessa and waited for instruction. "Please escort this gentleman out," Vanessa said. Her voice carried just barely just enough. "He's affecting the experience of our other clients." The guard's eyes met Nathan's. There was something in them that was not contempt, that was almost for a half-breath embarrassment. "Sir," the guard said, "if you'd come with me." Nathan held still a moment longer. He did not raise his voice. He did not reach into his pocket for the platinum card that would have ended this in a single motion. He looked once more slowly at the black coupe in its alcove at the back of the room, at the careful stitching. He could see, even from here on the headrest, at the photograph that lived now only in his memory of a woman holding a magnet shaped like a tomato. Then he turned and walked toward the door. The laughter behind him did not exactly happen. It was something quieter than that. It was the sound of a room exhaling at once, the small, satisfied murmur of people who have just watched something they think of as order being restored. Nathan walked through it without turning his head. He pushed open the glass door, and the steel-colored wind found him again on the sidewalk and pulled the warmth of the showroom out of his hoodie in one cold sweep. He walked the 2 blocks to where he had parked the sedan in no particular hurry. He unlocked the door, sat down in the driver's seat, and for a long moment, he simply rested both hands on the steering wheel and looked at nothing in particular through the windshield. The radio was off. The car around him smelled of old coffee and the faint cedar of an air freshener he had bought 8 months ago and never replaced. He thought about his wife. He thought about her, not because she would have been angry, but because she would not have been. She had grown up in a town where the wealthiest man on the block was the dentist, and she had spent her adult life surrounded by people who had more money than anyone could reasonably need, and her view of all of it had been the same view she had brought from the town with the dentist. She had once told Nathan in a kitchen in their first apartment that the only thing that ever made a person bigger than another person was kindness, and that anyone who told him different was selling something. His thoughts moved next to the woman with the porcelain cup and to the young salesman who had tried to help him before being pulled away. He had let her have the moment she wanted because something in him needed to see how far she would take it. She had taken it all the way to the door. He turned the key. The old engine started on the second try the way it always did in the cold. He pulled out of the parking space and drove east toward the harbor, the way he sometimes did when he needed the gray water in front of him to slow his thinking down. By the time he reached the lot above the docks, he had decided. There would be no call to the dealership, no letter from his attorney, no notice anywhere. He was not even angry, not in the way the day might have justified. What he felt instead was something flatter and steadier and far more useful, which was the calm certainty that a mistake had been made and that the people who made it deserved to see plainly and without theater exactly what they had done. He would go back in the morning. He would go back the way the woman with the porcelain cup understood the world, since that was the only language she seemed willing to read. And he would let the car at the curb do the talking he had refused to do today. That was all. That was the entire plan. He sat for another minute looking at the water, and then he turned the sedan around and drove home. The Rolls-Royce arrived at Blackstone Motors at 9:40 in the morning, 10 minutes before the showroom officially opened, which meant the staff was still drinking coffee at their desks when the long black hood eased into view through the front glass and stopped at the curb with the patience of something that had nowhere else to be. The car was a Phantom bespoke, the kind that does not come off a lot, the kind that arrives at an address only because someone has spent 2 years and just over $2 million asking for it to arrive. The body had been finished in a deep shade of black that drank the morning light. Vanessa Hart was standing at the espresso bar with her hand on the porcelain handle of a fresh cup, in the same low knot of dark hair and the same dark blouse she favored on important mornings, when the receptionist made a small sound at the front desk that turned every head in the room. Vanessa looked up. She set the cup down without drinking from it. She had spent 7 years on that floor, and she had never seen a phantom pull up to the front of Blackstone Motors that had not first been on a calendar 3 weeks in advance. The car door did not open right away. The driver, who was not a driver in the chauffeur sense, but a woman in a charcoal suit holding a leather portfolio against her hip, came around from the other side first and stood beside the rear passenger door with the unbothered stillness of a person who had done this exact thing in other cities for other rooms. Her name, though, no one inside the showroom knew it, yet was Claire Donovan, and she had been Nathan Cole's executive assistant for 11 years. Her eyes stayed on the watch at her wrist, not the glass. Vanessa was already moving. She crossed the marble at the same brisk, decisive pace she had used the morning before, only now her smile was assembling itself as she walked the wide one, the one she reserved for the kind of client who did not need to ask the price. 2 junior salesmen rose halfway out of their chairs. Daniel Reeves did not rise. Daniel had not slept well, and he was looking at the back of the Phantom with a small, narrow expression that Vanessa would not have recognized as recognition. The rear door opened. Vanessa was perhaps 4 steps from the curb when she saw the foot come out first, in a black leather shoe that was not new and not old, but worn the way a tool gets worn evenly with care. Then the gray hoodie. Then the face. Her own face, when she registered it, did a thing it had never done in 7 years on that floor. It dropped. Not in any large theatrical way. The smile simply went off her, like a light going out in a room she had forgotten she was standing in. Nathan Cole walked past her without acknowledgement. He stood up out of the Phantom in the same unhurried motion he had used to leave the showroom the day before, settled the hoodie on his shoulders, and said something quietly to Claire that Vanessa was too far away to hear. Claire nodded, once opened the leather portfolio, and walked past Vanessa toward the showroom doors, as if Vanessa were a column of air. Nathan followed her. His eyes did find Vanessa for the half-second it took to walk past her, and the look had nothing in it. It was not contempt. It was not satisfaction. It was the look a man gives a chair he does not intend to sit in. The receptionist on her feet now opened her mouth and closed it again. Claire stopped at the front desk and said in a voice that did not need to be loud to carry across the marble, "Good morning. Mr. Cole would like to speak with Mr. Whitmore. He's expected." Mr. Whitmore? Marcus Whitmore, the owner of Blackstone Motors. His name did not get used out loud on the sales floor more than twice a month. The receptionist reached for the phone. Vanessa behind them felt her own hand come up to the base of her throat and stop there. She had not told it to do that. Marcus Whitmore came down from the 2nd floor office 2 minutes later. He was a tall man in his early 60s, silver-haired, wearing the navy suit he kept for days when he expected to shake someone's hand on a contract. No such handshake had been on his calendar this morning. He had been drinking coffee and looking at a quarterly report when the call from the front desk reached him in a tone he had heard from his receptionist exactly twice in 9 years, both times correctly. He saw Nathan first, because Nathan was already inside, standing in the middle of the marble floor, with both hands in the front pocket of the hoodie, looking up at the chandelier, the way a man looks at a thing he has decided not to be impressed by. Marcus crossed the floor with the quick, careful stride of a man who knew the face from somewhere, but could not in the first 3 seconds place it. Then he placed it. His step did not change, but something in his shoulders did. "Mr. Cole," Marcus said. He extended a hand. "Marcus Whitmore, welcome to Blackstone. I was not expecting the pleasure this morning." Nathan took the hand briefly. "Mr. Whitmore, I'd like a few minutes if you have them." Of course. Of course. Please." Marcus gestured toward the glass-walled conference area near the back of the floor, the one with the white leather chairs and the small Italian table. He glanced once very quickly at Vanessa as he passed her, and the glance said nothing yet, only that the saying of something had been postponed. Vanessa fell in behind them at a small distance because no one had told her not to, and because every instinct she had built over 7 years was now telling her that being in the room was better than not being in the room. Claire was already in the conference area when they arrived, the leather portfolio open on the small table, a single page laid out on top of it. Nathan did not sit. Marcus, after a half-second of reading the room, did not sit either. Vanessa stood near the glass door with her fingertips pressed against the frame, as if the frame were the only solid thing left in the building. "Mr. Whitmore," Nathan said in the same flat, even tone he had used at the front desk. "I came in yesterday morning. I asked to see the black limited coupe. Your sales manager declined to show it to me. She suggested I'd be more comfortable at a partner lot in Quincy. She then asked your security officer to escort me from the premises in front of approximately a dozen of your clients." Marcus's mouth opened, then closed. He did not look at Vanessa. He looked at the page on the table. "Mr. Cole," Marcus said slowly, "I was not aware of any incident yesterday. I assure you, I'm not interested in apologies yet," Nathan said. He was not unkind when he said it. He simply set the word "yet" down on the table, the way Claire had set the page down, neatly where everyone could see it. "I'd like you to know who you turned away. Then I'd like you to tell me whether you'd like to continue this conversation." Marcus closed his mouth a second time and nodded once. "Please." "Cole Capital," Nathan said. "South End. We've been operational for 12 years. We closed last fiscal at $386 million in assets under management. We acquire cars for clients, partners, and incoming portfolio executives at a rate of between 11 and 15 units per calendar year. A meaningful share of those acquisitions over the past several years has been handled through this dealership. Not through your showroom floor, through your senior fleet representative, a man named Harold Pierce, who retired this past spring. Ms. Donovan here did the paperwork on every one of those units. The buyer name on those records is Donovan, not Cole. That's why neither of you recognized either of us when we walked in." Marcus's brow lifted half an inch at the mention of Harold Pierce, and then settled. He had signed Harold's retirement card himself 6 months ago. The name landed in the room, the way a quiet door closes behind a person already gone. Claire, without looking up, slid a second sheet of paper out from beneath the first and placed it gently on top. "The current year's slate includes 7 vehicles," Nathan continued. 3 for incoming partners at our Singapore office, 2 for a co-investment group in Charlotte, 2 for personal use. The combined order at the configurations our clients have requested is just over $4.1 million. I came in yesterday to look at the coupe because the coupe is the one of the 7 I intended to keep." Vanessa's fingers on the doorframe had gone white at the knuckles. She had heard the number 390,000 come out of her own mouth less than 24 hours ago in the same building to the same man. She had heard her own voice say the words "within your range." The sentence kept replaying in her head with a kind of slow, awful clarity, the way certain sentences do when they have finally found their proper listener. Marcus did look at Vanessa then. The look was brief, and it was not the look of a man preparing to defend an employee. It was the look of a man counting very quickly what an employee had cost him. "Mr. Cole," Marcus said, and his voice had gone careful, in the way voices go careful, when they are still working out which words are safe. I am genuinely sorry. I would like the opportunity to make this right. If you'll allow me, I'd like to handle the slate personally." Nathan let the offer sit in the air for a long moment. He did not look at Vanessa. He did not need to. His gaze went instead past Marcus's shoulder, across the marble floor of the showroom he had been escorted out of yesterday, to the alcove at the back, where the black coupe still sat behind its panel of glass. "I'd like to think about that," Nathan said. The not yes hung in the room like a held breath. Marcus, who had spent 40 years selling cars and reading rooms, understood at once that a not yes from a man like Nathan Cole was not a negotiating posture. It was a door that had been left open by courtesy, and that could be closed at any moment by the same courtesy, and that no amount of pushing would widen. It was at this point that Vanessa, against every instinct that had ever served her well, spoke. "Mr. Cole," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she expected it to, and she had to lift it on the second word to get it into the room. "Mr. Cole, I owe you a very serious apology. I made a terrible assumption yesterday. I want you to know that this is not how we treat our clients. If you will allow me to step out of the conversation and let Mr. Whitmore handle—" Nathan turned his head toward her, then for the first time since he had walked past her at the curb. The look was longer this time, but it carried the same emptiness it had carried before. He let her finish without interrupting. When she was done, he looked back at Marcus as if she had not spoken at all. It was the not looking that did it. Vanessa had been ignored before. She had been corrected, criticized, even once screamed at on the floor by a client whose lease application had been declined. She had never been looked past. The looking past was its own kind of sentence, and she understood it the moment it was handed to her, because she had spent the last 7 years handing it to other people. She had handed it to him yesterday. Marcus, who had not yet found a footing in the conversation, took a small breath and tried for one. "Mr. Cole, the slate, the 7 units. We can have configurations to you by end of week. I can personally guarantee the coupe is yours at our cost. We can talk about the rest as a package. I would consider it a great courtesy if you allowed us to." "Mr. Whitmore," Nathan said, "I want to be direct with you because I think you've been direct with me. I came in here this morning prepared to give you the slate. I am no longer prepared to give you the slate." The silence that followed was not theatrical. It was the silence of a number being deleted from a spreadsheet in another room, the silence of a forecast quietly revising itself downward. Marcus's hand came to rest on the back of one of the white leather chairs, and his fingers spread slightly along the seam, the way a man's fingers do when he is trying to keep his body from giving him away. "Mr. Cole," Marcus began, "if there's anything—" "There isn't," Nathan said. "Not today. I want to be clear that this isn't personal, Mr. Whitmore. I have nothing against your dealership. The cars on this floor are excellent. The young man at the third desk on the left tried to help me yesterday before he was instructed not to. That was the only kindness I received in this building, and I'd like you to know his name was Daniel Reeves, because that's a thing that ought to be in someone's memory besides mine." Marcus's eyes flicked almost involuntarily toward the sales floor. Daniel was at his desk, head down, pretending very hard to be reading the screen in front of him. He had been pretending to read it for the last 6 minutes. "I am not going to ask you to discipline your sales manager," Nathan went on. "That is your decision to make as the owner of your business. I am also not going to give you my slate. That is my decision to make as the owner of mine. I came here this morning so that the people in this room would understand without any confusion what they declined to see yesterday. We have achieved that. I don't think there's much else to be served by my staying." He turned toward Claire. Claire was already closing the leather portfolio with the same economy of motion she had used to open it. She slid the 2 pages back into the inside pocket and tucked the portfolio under her arm. The room itself seemed to tilt around Vanessa. She felt it the way a swimmer feels a current pulling at the ankle, not violently, just steadily in one direction away from anything she could call shore. She heard herself say, "Mr. Cole, please, please. I'm asking you, just give the dealership a chance to." Nathan stopped at the door of the glass conference room. He turned his head, only his head, and for the first time that morning, he looked directly at her fully with his whole attention. The attention was worse than the not looking had been. It was the attention of a man who had decided to give a sentence the dignity of being said to her face. "Ms. Hart." He said, "You didn't decline to sell me a car yesterday. You decided who in this building deserved to be a person. That is a decision a salesperson can be coached out of. I'm not sure it's a decision a manager can be coached out of. I'll leave that question to Mr. Whitmore." He stepped through the door of the conference room and walked back across the marble toward the front of the showroom, with Claire one half step behind him. His stride did not slow at the alcove with the black coupe. He did not turn his head toward it. He walked past Daniel's desk, and as he passed it, he laid 2 fingers very briefly on the corner of the desk, not stopping, not speaking the way one passing soldier touches the helmet of another. Daniel looked up. Their eyes met for less than a second. Nathan kept walking. At the front glass, the Phantom was still at the curb. The receptionist held the door open without being asked. Claire passed through it. First, then Nathan and the morning air swept in around them and carried out in the same gust the warmth of the showroom that Vanessa had built her 7 years inside. The car door closed. The Phantom pulled smoothly away from the curb and went south on the avenue toward the river, and the corner it turned around took the last of its black paint out of the showroom's frame of glass. Vanessa was still standing in the doorway of the conference room. Her hand was still on the frame. Marcus Whitmore was looking at her, not unkindly, but with a long, weighing look that she recognized at once, because she had given that exact look with that exact length to junior salespeople she had decided to let go. He did not say anything yet. He only nodded very slightly in the direction of his office upstairs, and then he turned and walked toward the stairs without checking to see if she was following. She did not follow right away. She stood at the conference room door, looking out across the marble at the alcove, where the black coupe sat behind its panel of glass, and for the first time in 7 years on that floor, she did not know what to do with her hands. The meeting in Marcus Whitmore's office lasted 40 minutes. Vanessa Hart did most of her listening with her hands folded in her lap, because she had discovered on the way up the stairs that her hands did not know where else to go. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He sat behind his desk with a folder closed in front of him and explained in the careful, even tone of a man who had run a business for 30 years that he was not firing her. He was removing her from the floor for 2 weeks, while he spoke privately with the 11 employees who had been on the floor the previous morning. Her commissions on the current quarter would be reviewed. What role she would have at the dealership after the 2 weeks were over would depend, he said, on what those 11 people told him. She did not argue. There was nothing to argue. She understood somewhere underneath the small, bright panic that had been running through her chest since the Phantom had pulled away from the curb. That arguing was a luxury reserved for people who still believed they were the wronged party in a story. She walked out of the office with the folder Marcus had not opened and a clean copy of the company handbook he had set on top of it without comment. And she went down the back stairs because she did not want to cross the marble. The 2 weeks passed slowly. They passed in an apartment in the Back Bay that she had decorated 2 years earlier, with the careful eye of a woman who wanted any visitor to understand at once what kind of woman lived there. The white couch, the marble tray on the coffee table holding 3 coffee table books she had chosen for their spines. She looked at the apartment differently now. In the long hours of mornings, she did not have to be anywhere. And what she saw was that she had built a room designed to be read by people she did not know, in a language she had borrowed from people she did not particularly like. Her colleagues did not call. 2 of them texted briefly on the first day. The texts were of the cautious, neutral kind that people send when they want a record of having behaved decently without committing to anything. After that, the phone went quiet. She had not realized before how much of what she had thought of as friendship at Blackstone Motors had been the steady traffic of being useful to people. When she stopped being on the floor, the traffic stopped. The discovery did not make her angry. It made her, for the first time in a long time, tired in a way that sleep did not fix. She began to walk in the mornings. She walked the long loop around the public garden, and then, when that loop became too familiar, she walked across the river and back along the Cambridge side. And on those walks, she found herself thinking against her will of a man in a gray hoodie standing in front of a black coupe, asking in the same flat tone, the second time as the first, to see the interior. She thought about the laugh that had risen behind her in the showroom that morning, and how she had not turned around to see whose laugh it was because she had been too busy enjoying the fact that the laugh was on her side. Across the river in the South End, Nathan Cole returned to his usual mornings. He worked at home most days, in a small study at the back of a brownstone that looked out on a maple tree that had been there longer than the building. He read the news, took the calls he needed to take, and ran his firm with the same quiet, careful hand he had run it with for 12 years. He did not tell anyone, not even Claire Donovan, what had happened at Blackstone Motors. The slate of 7 vehicles was reassigned to a dealership in Newton within 48 hours, and the Newton dealership delivered the coupe to his garage on a Thursday afternoon on the same hand-stitched seats his wife had once clipped from a magazine. He did not drive the coupe right away. He left it in the garage for almost 2 weeks, and once late in the evening of the second week, he went down the stairs and stood in front of it with the lights off and one palm resting on the hood, and he stayed there for a long time. What he felt standing in the dark with the metal cooling under his hand was not triumph. It was the smaller and stranger feeling of having finished something that no one else in the world could possibly know had needed to be finished. He thought about how much of his life now lived in that category of things only one other person had understood, who wasn't here to understand them anymore. His mind moved then to the woman in the dark blouse. There was no anger in the thought. He had used up whatever anger he had on the drive to the harbor the afternoon she had asked the guard to walk him out. What he thought about her instead was something that had been gathering in him for years and had simply found in her a face to attach itself to. He had watched over a working lifetime, the slow drift of a country toward a way of seeing people that began at the shoes and ended at the watch and never bothered to look up. He had not become a man who fought it. He had become a man who avoided it. The avoidance, he understood now, was its own kind of permission. In the meantime, a smaller piece of business resolved itself without his having to lift a finger. The Monday after the Phantom, Claire Donovan placed a call to Daniel Reeves at Blackstone Motors and asked in the polite, neutral voice she used for matters Nathan had not technically asked her to handle, but obviously wanted, handled whether Daniel would be open to a conversation. Daniel said yes before she finished the sentence. 2 weeks later, he started at the same Newton dealership that had absorbed the slate in a position that paid him 1/3 more than Blackstone had been paying. On his first morning at the new desk, Daniel found a small, unmarked envelope in the top drawer containing a handwritten note that read, only in a single line, "You were the kindness. Keep being it." The note was unsigned. Daniel knew who had written it. He kept it in the drawer for as long as he worked there. It was on a Tuesday just over a month after the morning of the Phantom and 10 days after her suspension had ended that Vanessa came to find Nathan. She had been back on the floor at Blackstone for a little more than a week in a non-managing role Marcus had not yet given a permanent title to. She did not come to Cole Capital's offices, which she had looked up on her second night at home, and decided on the third night that she did not have the right to enter. She came instead to a small coffee shop on Tremont Street that a former co-worker had once mentioned in passing was a place Mr. Cole sometimes worked from in the mornings. She did not call ahead. She did not bring flowers or a card or any of the small, softening objects that women in her old life had been taught to bring to apologies. She wore a plain wool coat over a plain sweater, and she had taken her hair out of the knot, and the small gold earrings stayed at home. She saw him before he saw her. He was at a table by the window, with a laptop open, and a cup of black coffee at his elbow, reading something on the screen with the same unhurried attention he had brought to looking at the chandelier in the showroom. She stood inside the door for almost a minute, holding her coat closed at the collar, and then she walked across the floor toward him with the same careful steps she had walked toward him across the marble 5 weeks earlier. Only the steps were slower this time, and she was not smiling. He looked up when she was 2 tables away. There was no surprise in his face. There was no welcome in it either. He closed the laptop, set it gently to one side, and indicated the chair across from him with the back of his hand. She sat down. The waitress drifted over, and Vanessa, without looking up from the table, asked for water. The waitress brought it and left them. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I'm not going to take much of your time. I'm not here on behalf of the dealership. Mr. Whitmore doesn't know I came. I'm not here to ask you to do anything. I came because I owe you an apology that I should have given you the morning you walked in, and I would like, if you'll let me, to give it to you now." He did not answer. He looked at her, the way he had looked at her across the conference table 5 weeks ago, fully with his whole attention. She felt the attention again, and this time she did not try to fill it with anything. She let it sit on her. "I was wrong," she said. "I was wrong about you in a way that wasn't an accident. I'd like to be able to tell you I made a mistake, but a mistake is something a person makes once. I had been doing what I did to you for years before you walked in. I had a list in my head of who got to be a customer and who didn't, and I worked the list every day. You were just the day the list met somebody it couldn't survive meeting. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry because of what it cost the dealership. I'm sorry because of what I did to you in front of those people on what was probably not an easy morning to walk into a showroom in the first place." He took a small breath. He had not expected the last sentence, the apology he had expected, even the version of it that admitted the pattern, because he had seen enough apologies in his life to know which ones had been rehearsed. He had not expected her to understand, even in passing, that the morning had cost him something separate from the showroom. He did not show that she had landed it. He simply held her gaze for another moment, and then looked down at the coffee cup. "Thank you," he said. "I accept your apology." She had thought walking in that she would feel relief when he said those words. What she felt instead was a small, quiet humbling, because the words had cost him nothing to say, and that she understood was the difference between his side of the table and hers. He had not been carrying the morning. She had. "I should tell you," he said, "that I won't be coming back to Blackstone. That isn't a punishment. I'm not in the business of punishing people. It's only that a man my age learns to be careful with the rooms he walks into, and that's a room I don't need to walk into anymore. I hope you'll do well wherever you land. I'd encourage you to land somewhere." She nodded. Her voice was unsteady for a beat, and when she had it back, she said, "Is there anything you would, if you don't mind my asking anything, you would want me to take from this, beyond what I've already taken?" He looked at her again, and for the first time, something in his face moved not toward warmth exactly, but toward the small, plain seriousness a man wears when he is going to say a thing he means. "The richest customer in your showroom," he said, "is almost never the best-dressed one. The man who is willing to be ignored by you for 10 minutes without raising his voice is almost always the most powerful person in the room. You learn that, and you don't need any other rule. Stop reading the watch. Read the patience." She nodded again and did not say anything else. He reached for his laptop and slid it back in front of him, which was between 2 people who had just finished a conversation, the closing of a door, a polite one, but a door. She stood up. She left a $5 bill on the table next to the untouched glass of water, because leaving without paying for something felt to her like one more thing she was not ready to do today. And she walked out of the coffee shop and into the cold afternoon on Tremont Street. That evening, Nathan drove the coupe for the first time. He took it west out of the city along the river and onto the back roads above Concord, and he kept the windows up and the radio off and the speed easy. The sun was going down behind him by the time he turned around, and the sky over the road ahead of him went through the long, slow colors, A New England sky goes through, in late autumn, from gold to copper, to the deep settled red that means the day is honestly done. He thought very briefly of the woman in the apartment in the back bay, and he hoped without sentiment that she would do the work. He thought longer of his wife in the way he always thought of her now, which was not as someone who was gone, but as someone who had simply walked into a room a few minutes ahead of him and was waiting patiently for him to finish whatever it was he had stayed behind to finish. A man's worth, he had learned, was never the number on his account, or the make of his car, or the cut of his coat. A man's worth was the way he behaved in a room where no one knew who he was. The people who understood that were the people who could be trusted with everything else. The people who did not were the people the world would eventually, in its own time, teach. He turned the coupe east toward the lights of Boston and drove home.